Welcome to the Page of Crime. Today we are going to go over a guy some considered the modern-day Jack the Ripper. So if you are into true crime content, this is the channel for you. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button and hit that bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos as they are uploaded. Also have to send a big thanks to all my subscribers and all those liking the video and commenting. But with that said, let's get into the video. Can you imagine a series of heinous crimes being committed right under the nose of law enforcement? Yet the culprit remained at large due to a series of blunders and oversights. This is the chilling story of Robert Napper, a case that shook the United Kingdom in the early 90s. Napper's story begins on February 25, 1966, in Erith, southeast London, nearby Abbey Wood. He was the eldest child of a driving instructor, Brian Napper, and his wife Pauline, along with his 3 siblings. However, the family home was troubled and dysfunctional. The marriage was marred by violence, with Napper witnessing his father's physical abuse towards his mother. When Napper was just 9, his parents divorced. With their mother's health deteriorating, Napper and his siblings were placed in foster care, undergoing psychiatric treatment at the Maudsley Hospital in Camberwell for 6 years. It was during this time that Napper was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome. School wasn't a haven for Napper either. Shunned by his peers and described as despised, he frequently truanted and shoplifted. A pivotal incident occurred when Napper was 12. A family friend SA'd him on a camping trip. The offender was jailed, but this traumatic event triggered a personality change in Napper. He became introverted, obsessively tidy and reclusive, spending most of his time in his room, emerging only to bully his siblings. He even spied on his sister while she was undressed. In 1981, a 15-year-old Napper left school to pursue a catering course and took on various factory jobs. He would soon move back to live with his mother. His first recorded criminal offense occurred in 1986 at the age of 20, when he was found in possession of an airgun. He was fined and given a conditional discharge. Then, in 1989, he would confess to his mother that he had raped a woman on Plumstead Common. She rang the police immediately, but after searching files, an officer told her no such attack on the common had been reported. They decided not to pursue the inquiry due to them being unable to trace a victim to the crime. Even though in August of the same year, a 31-year-old mother whose home backed onto the common had reported to police she had been raped in her home in front of her children. The intruder entered the house through the rear door, armed with a Stanley knife and wearing a mask. Police had taken DNA from the woman, but never questioned Napper about the assault. His mother decided to throw him out and cut contact with him when she could no longer put up with his behavior. He would soon move to a bedsit in Plumstead, southeast London. He would go to work as normal. His colleagues described him as dull and boring. The warehouseman and machine operator at a plastics factory turned up for work on time and paid the rent promptly on his obsessively neat flat. Robin McCarley, Napper's former foreman at the plastics factory, also said he was really boring. He said Napper's only distinctive characteristic was the sports bag he carried everywhere. He called it his toolbox, but in his spare time he stalked young women, watching them through their windows under the cover of darkness. The Green Chain attacks, named for their proximity to the Green Chain walking route, began around the same time. In March, attempts were made to grape 2 17-year-old girls 2 weeks apart, one in Lewisham and one in Eltham. On a bank holiday in May 1992, a 22-year-old woman, known only as C, was heading to a barbecue, pushing her 2-year-old in her buggy along the Green Chain Walk in Eltham. In a derelict part of the path, she was brutally attacked. Grabbed from behind with force, a ligature was placed around her neck and she was pulled to the ground. Stripped, graped and battered about the head repeatedly for several minutes, she was left looking battered and bloody, all occurring in front of her young child. Sometime later, C was able to describe what happened. "I asked him not to kill me," she recounted. "He didn't stop hitting me. He put a rope around my neck and kept bashing me on the head." Then on the 15th of July, 1992 on Wimbledon Common, former model and young mother Rachel Nickell, who was in her early 20s, simply going for a walk with her son, was attacked by someone who was lurking in a nearby bush, stabbing her 49 times and SA'ing her in front of her son Alexander, then aged 2, leaving him unharmed, who clung onto his mother's body begging her to wake up. He would even use a small piece of paper to cover a cut of his mother's forehead. A passerby would end up calling the emergency services after noticing a traumatized Alex covered in blood. At the scene, the police would find a set of footprints near the body. they would make a mold of these prints. A major inquiry was set up after the attacks in August. Officers were hunting a perpetrator who showed extreme violence towards his victims, using a knife and on more than one occasion attacking a woman with her children present. The police profiler Paul Britton suggested the killer would be in his 20s or 30s, lived alone not far from Wimbledon Common, with isolated hobbies, an interest in knives and the occult, and sexually sadistic fantasies. Detectives issued a photo fit of the green chain suspect, and a neighbor of Napa reported him. Napa was questioned but ruled out because police were looking for a suspect between 5 feet 7 inches and 5 feet 9 inches tall, and Napa was 6 feet 2 inches, though he walked with a stoop. He volunteered to give a DNA sample, a move which made police believe he was unlikely to be guilty. No sample was taken, as he never turned up at the station to do so. Police say they didn't follow it up because he didn't match the description due to his height. A few days later, another member of the public called police to say Bob Napa looked like the suspect. Officers returned to his flat and asked him again to go to a police station and give a blood sample. Napa failed to turn up, and within a few weeks he was eliminated from the investigation because at 6 feet 2 inches tall, he did not fit the 5 feet 7 inches description of the suspect. In October of the same year, he was arrested for stalking a civilian employee at the Plumstead police station, which led to a search of his flat. The search revealed an arsenal of weapons, a handgun, a .22 pistol, over 200 rounds of ammunition, knives and a crossbow, including 6 crossbow belts, and a London A to Z with the green chain locations marked, pocket diaries that included notes saying he had fears that his food was being spiked, that people were talking about him behind his back, and how women offered instant sunshine, but were only out to exploit him. There was also a scribble about Mengeler's Way, a reference to the Nazi surgical experimenter. His dictionary contained handwritten stars against the words immolate, necropolis, carcass, Holocaust and regicide, hand-drawn maps, notes written on the borders of newspapers. In the notes were references to methods of how to bind and restrain people, including the phrase cling film on the legs. Another note named particular streets and gave map references for them on the A to Z. Pages had been marked with black dots highlighting certain areas. Other locations were marked with dashes. They were concentrated in the Plumstead, Eltham and Woolwich areas of southeast London. In one diary, Napa referred to several women, calling one a sodden filthy bitch. In one of the A to Z's was a fitness card for a young blonde woman from Eltham. It was placed in the page corresponding to her home address. Napa pleaded guilty to possessing a firearm and ammunition. A psychiatric report described him as, without a doubt, an immediate threat to himself and the public. Despite these alarming findings, Napa only served an 8-week jail term for possessing a firearm and ammunition. No other inquiries were made. In April of the following year, Napa's fingerprints were found on a tin box discovered buried on Winds Common, neighbouring Plumstead Common, which contained a Mauser handgun. Yet, he was never questioned about the find, despite the fingerprint link. In July, Napa's name surfaced again when a couple reported a man spying on their neighbour, a young blonde woman who often walked in her flat semi-naked. When police arrived, they spoke with Napa, who gave his name and address, but his behaviour led them to label him as a potential grapist. The officer's notes read, "Subject strange, abnormal, should be considered as a possible grapist, indecency-type suspect." It was around this time that the Nickell inquiry team was closing in on their suspect, Colin Stagg. Despite ruling Napa out of a series of grapes linked to the Nickell case due to non-matching DNA, the police continued their pursuit of Stagg. He had to travel to southeast London for an identity parade for a series of attacks. As he was about to go, the police came in and said he didn't have to anymore because his DNA didn't match. Despite ruling him out of the attacks, which police were by now linking to the Nickell murder, pursued their case against Stagg, calling it Operation Edsel. Colin Stagg, an unemployed man who often walked his dog in the area and owned books on the occult. Also, a woman identified him as the perpetrator in an indecent exposure case, and the investigators took this as a sign that he was a sexual deviant. Stagg himself claimed to have been sunbathing nude in a secluded area, and that the woman walked in on him. The case took a turn when a female officer from the Metropolitan Police Special Operations Group went undercover as Lizzie James, and posed as a friend of a woman Stagg used to be in contact with via a Lonely Hearts column. For 5 months she corresponded with Stagg, meeting him, speaking to him on the telephone and exchanging letters pretending to be romantically interested in him, hoping to entice him into admitting his guilt. As the correspondence continued, Lizzie talked about sexual fantasies, while Stagg, who was sexually inexperienced, mostly shared his romantic fantasies and played along with her flirtations. During a taped conversation, Lizzie asked Stagg outright whether he had anything to do with Nickell's murder, saying she could only have sex with the man who committed that murder. Stagg replied that he wasn't the killer. Despite the officer's attempts to associate sexual pleasure with violent fantasies, Stagg maintained his innocence. Police released a taped conversation between the police officer and him in which she claimed to enjoy hurting people, to which he mumbled, "Please explain, as I live a quiet life. If I have disappointed you, please don't dump me. Nothing like this has happened to me before." When she went on to say, "If only you had done the Wimbledon common murder, if only you had unalived her, it would be all right," he replied, "I'm terribly sorry, but I haven't." His responses to her provocations were awkward and confused, but never violent or incriminating. Yet, in August 1993, based on this shaky evidence, the police arrested Stagg and charged him with Nickell's murder. He would be placed on remand, defended by barrister Jim Sturman. While Stagg was on remand, another horrific crime took place. In October 1993, Napa would start following 27-year-old Samantha Bissett and watching her through her window, and would occasionally see her making love to her boyfriend Conrad Ellum in the living room of her Plumstead flat. On November 3rd, Napa would wait for Conrad Ellum to leave the flat to go to work. Napa knocked on Bissett's door. As she opened it, he would force his way into the Bissett home in Plumstead. The first strike was immediate, striking her in the neck. He would then go on to stab her over 70 times to the neck and chest. He would then turn his attention to her 4-year-old daughter, Jasmine Jemima Bissett, who was SA'd and smothered, leaving her body in the bed and covering her up as though she was asleep, and surrounded the bed with toys. He would then return to the sitting room. Here he mutilated Samantha Bissett's body, taking away body parts as a trophy. But before he left, he positioned her body against the sofa, in the position in which he had seen her making love with her partner Conrad Ellum. The crime scene was reportedly so grisly that the police photographer assigned to the case was forced to take 2 years' leave after witnessing it. The perpetrator of the Bissett murders was nicknamed the Plumstead Ripper. In May 1994, after a fingerprint belonging to Napa and a trainer footprint was recovered from Samantha's flat, he was arrested by DS Alan Jackaman and charged with the murders of Samantha and Jasmine Bissett. DNA tests conclusively linked him to a series of attacks known as the Green Chain Grapes, involving 86 women. Yet, despite the similarities between the Nickell and Bissett crimes, and both men being in custody, the detectives failed to make the connection. Stagg remained the prime suspect in the Nickell case. The Metropolitan Police were strongly influenced by forensic psychologist Paul Britton at a time when criminal profiling was seen as a magic bullet, who immediately zeroed in on Colin Stagg, believing in the infallibility of criminal profiling. He confidently declared that Stagg had the same sexually deviant-based personality disorder as the killer, and it was very, very unlikely that 2 people with the same disorder would be on the common at the same time. He also ruled out Napa on the basis that in the Nickell case the child had been unharmed, while in the Bissett attack the child died. Stagg found himself ensnared in a police honey trap, a form of entrapment that involved an undercover detective, Lizzie James, attempting to elicit a confession from him. When the case went to trial in 1994, during a committal hearing, the judge dismissed the evidence obtained from this operation, calling it deceptive conduct of the grossest kind. Calling it a honey trap, with no other evidence against him, the prosecution had no choice but to withdraw their case, leading to Stagg's acquittal. The public, however, was not so easily convinced and outraged over the decision. Undercover detective Lizzie James, who was used to honey trap Stagg, claimed the pressure of the case gave her PTSD and was reportedly awarded £125,000 in compensation. Stagg wouldn't stay away from trouble for too long. He was given probation in 1995 for threatening a man with an axe on Wimbledon Common and possession of a weapon. Napa would be convicted at the Old Bailey in October 1995 and admitted to other violent crimes. He admitted to 2 grapes and 2 attempted grapes on the Green Chain Walk. A psychiatrist from Broadmoor, Dr. Natalie Pizzora, told the court Napper was severely mentally ill and should remain at Broadmoor for treatment. She said there was a high risk of him committing further crimes, or even killing himself. Napper's mental state was a significant factor in his case. Upon his admission to Broadmoor, a high-security hospital, he exhibited a number of delusions, including the belief that he could transmit thoughts through telepathy, thought people were out to get him. He believed he had won the Nobel Peace Prize, had an MA in maths, had millions of pounds in the bank in Sidcup, Kent, and was listed in Who's Who along with his family. He also believed changes had been made to the calendar, making him believe unusual things were taking place. Had medals from fighting in Angola, had been kneecapped by the IRA, and had had his fingers blown off by an IRA parcel bomb, but they had miraculously grown back. He would be questioned about Nickell's death in December 1995. He denied any involvement, and refuses to admit any offences for which there is no forensic evidence. In 1996, to prove his innocence to the public, that were doubtful, Stagg did a televised lie detector test on the Cook report, which he passed. Meanwhile, Rachel Nickell's partner, Andre Hanscom, and their son Alex moved to France in 1996, driven away by media intrusion. In 2001, a crime documentary aired on ITV where Keith Pedder, the lead detective for the Rachel Nickell murder case, stated he still believed Stagg was guilty and that the justice system had failed that day. The case went cold until 2002, when the cold case was reopened, breathing new life into a mystery that had been left unsolved for over a decade. Advanced forensic techniques, the likes of which had been previously unavailable, were now in the hands of Angela Gallup and her team, including Roy Green. Their first point of scrutiny was the clothing of the victim, Rachel Nickell, and her 2-year-old son Alex. Tests conducted on these items led to an intriguing discovery, an unknown male DNA sample. Though insufficient to confirm an identity, the sample was significant enough to rule out certain suspects. The hunt for the perpetrator was narrowing. Fast forward to 2004, DNA evidence linked Robert Napper to the case. A microscopic, crucial piece of evidence was unearthed. A tiny flake of red paint, nestled in the hair combings from Rachel's son. Upon comparison with the paint on a toolbox belonging to Napper, Mike Gorn found an undeniable match. The flake of paint even bore a layer of steel on one side, identical to the toolbox's material. Further investigation led to a molded footprint, reminiscent of the heel of a shoe that was strikingly similar to one owned by Napper, albeit slightly smaller. Roy and his team found themselves on Wimbledon Common, recreating the conditions that led to the footprint. They discovered that as the wearer of the shoes lifted his foot to take another step, a partial vacuum was created that sucked in the muddy soil around the edges of the shoe, matching the molded footprint perfectly. In 2006, 40-year-old Napper, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and Asperger syndrome, was interviewed by the Scotland Yard team at Broadmoor for 2 days on suspicion of Nickell's murder. A year later, on the 28th of November 2007, Napper was charged with the murder. Napper appeared at City of Westminster Magistrates Court on the 4th of December 2007 and was sent back to Broadmoor until another hearing on the 20th of December. The trial for the murder of Rachel Nickell took place 16 years after her tragic death, on the 18th of December 2008. Despite his initial plea of not guilty, the court was presented with overwhelming evidence. The DNA, the paint, and the footwear mark all pointed towards Napper. Police even found that he had an appointment in the area on the day of the murder. Eventually, Napper pled guilty, citing diminished responsibility as his defense. On the 18th of December 2008, he was sentenced to indefinite detention at Broadmoor Hospital for the 1992 manslaughter of Rachel Nickell. Mr. Justice Griffiths Williams said, "You are on any view a very dangerous man." Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric facility, has housed notorious criminals like the Yorkshire Ripper Peter Sutcliffe, Charles Bronson, and Ronnie Cray. Following his conviction, Napper was interviewed about another murder, that of Ruth Penelope Bell, also known as Penny. However, no evidence linked him to Bell's murder, and he was cleared of involvement. The summer sun of June 6, 1991, cast a deceptive glow over the day that would forever change the lives of Penny Bell's family. Penny Bell, a successful businesswoman, left her home on the morning of June 6th, a day like any other, or so it seemed. Her husband, Alistair, and their son left the house at 8:30. Penny, usually one to wave them off, didn't do so that day, something Alistair attributed to the disruption caused by their ongoing kitchen renovation, other than that he said bright and chirpy. At approximately 20 to 10 a.m., Penny left the house in her Arctic blue Jaguar XJS. Telling the builders renovating the kitchen she was running late for an appointment, she drove off. A mystery appointment, as no record of it was found in her diary or other papers. Where was she going? Who was she meeting? Questions that remain unanswered to this day. It has been suggested that she could have been collecting someone from the railway station, as a train arrived at the station at 9:50. An electrician, who was the last known person to speak to Bell, described her demeanour as normal and casual. A witness reported seeing a white male about 48 years old, about 5 or 10 inches waiting by a brown or bronze car, get into Penny's Jaguar around 10 to 10 in the morning on the Fulmer Common Road opposite the Bridgetine Convent and Guest House adjacent to Black Park. The witness, who was walking her dog, was sure the driver of the Jaguar was Bell. Was this the man Penny was meeting? About half an hour later, another witness recalled a blue Jaguar driving slowly along Greenford Road, its hazard lights flashing. A third witness came forward some months later and claimed he saw Bell driving into the car park with a passenger and mouthing an appeal for help. At 11 a.m., Penny Bell was sitting motionless in the driver's seat of her car in the Gunnell Leisure Centre car park. At first, a passers-by assumed she was sleeping, but as the clock ticked 12:15, the horrifying truth was revealed. The police were alerted and her body was discovered. Penny Bell had been brutally attacked, stabbed more than 50 times in a murder of unspeakable violence, with wounds to the chest and arms with a 3 to 4 inch blade in what police were to describe as a frenzied attack. A forensic investigation determined that the killer had stabbed her from the passenger seat before exiting the car and frantically stabbing her from the driver's side. It is believed that Bell was murdered around 10:30. Despite the leisure centre's bustling activity and nearly full car park, which had 153 spaces, the killer had managed to carry out the attack unseen and unheard, aided by a high hedge that blocked the view of the car. As investigators combed through the crime scene, they found wallpaper samples laid out in the center console of the car, but nothing connecting her to a killer. The investigation into Penny Bell's murder has been extensive and exhaustive, yet her killer remains at large. Her family, particularly her daughter Lauren, continues to seek justice for Penny, re-examining forensic evidence and urging anyone with information to come forward. The police investigation suggested that the killer would have been heavily bloodstained following the murder, but no witnesses came forward. A witness, Patricia Parry, did see a car leaving the scene at speed and being driven erratically around the time of the murder. It followed her along Ruislip Road East and into Cuckoo Avenue, where it overtook her. The police investigation determined that Bell was a happily married and successful businesswoman and could find no reason why anyone would want to kill her. Police believed that it was very likely that Bell knew her killer, but have struggled to ascertain a motive. The police did not believe that robbery was the motive, and Bell's handbag remained in the car untouched, and there was no evidence of SA. The frenzied nature of the attack, however, suggested a personal motive. 4,000 people had been questioned by the police by May 1992. Alistair and Bell's business partner Michael Flynn offered a £20,000 reward for evidence leading to a conviction. It was also believed that Napper could have committed most or all of the attacks attributed to the Green Chain Grapist, who carried out at least 70 savage attacks across southeast London over a 4-year period ending in 1994. The earliest of the Green Chain Grapes have been linked to Napper and were those he admitted to in 1995. Robert Napper could have also murdered schoolgirl Claire Tiltman. This story begins in 1993 with the brutal murder of 16-year-old schoolgirl Claire Tiltman. The accused, Colin Ash Smith, an individual with a deep-seated hatred and fear of women, was known for his midnight walks, armed with weapons. Despite confessing to stabbing 2 women in the past, he denied any intention to grape or unalive. In a twist of events, the defense suggested other potential suspects, including Robert Napper and Peter Rivers. Robert Napper had a history of brutal killings and sex attacks, making him a plausible suspect. This led to a trial filled with conflicting theories and evidence. Over the years, Ash Smith, a knife-obsessed loner, had been imprisoned for similar attacks on other young women. It was only 2 decades later he was finally branded as pure evil by police and was convicted of Claire's murder. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, raising questions about the delay in his arrest. Ash Smith had a history of stalking and attacking females to feel empowered. He kept a newspaper marking Claire's death as a trophy. He confessed to his crimes, revealing a pattern of violence, yet denied killing Claire. However, the evidence and his violent past linked him to the crime. Despite the conviction, the defense lawyers suggested that Napper could have been the real perpetrator. They presented evidence linking Napper to the area where Claire was killed, suggesting he could have been the one responsible for the murder. A train from Woolwich had arrived at Greenhithe Station at 6:07 p.m., just before the schoolgirl's murder. A 12-year-old boy saw a man matching Napper's description near the station minutes after the train arrived. In the end, the jury had to decide between Napper or Ash Smith as the person responsible for Claire's death. After a long and arduous trial, Ash Smith was convicted for the murder of Claire Tiltman. But what if the wrong man was convicted? Colin Ash Smith maintained his innocence, always denying murdering the 16-year-old schoolgirl. Despite the conviction, the question still lingers. Did justice really prevail in this case? Exonerated, Colin Stagg received a formal public apology from the police, as well as a record financial compensation of £700,000 after suing the police for damages. The families of Samantha Bissett and Rachel Nickell had received apologies from the police. Speaking outside the Old Bailey, Andrew Nickell said, "We sincerely hope that Napper will spend the rest of his life in a totally secure environment. A long time ago, we came to terms with Rachel's death. We now hope to draw a line and move forward into the new year." He thanked the police and investigators and said that despite mistakes being made in the original investigation, the family never felt that officers gave anything less than their best. Imagine being excluded from a criminal investigation simply because of your height. This is the reality that unfolded in the Metropolitan Police Force's handling of a horrifying murder case, as detailed in a report by the Independent Police Complaints Commission, released on the 3rd of June 2010. This report painted a chilling picture of a catalogue of bad decisions and errors by the Metropolitan Police. One such blunder involved the dismissal of Robert Napper from inquiries into the green chain grapes because he was over 6 feet tall. Yes, you heard that right. Based on a description of a 5'7" suspect, detectives decided to exclude anyone over 6 feet, resulting in Napper being free to commit the heinous murder of Nickell. The report didn't mince words when it said that officers missed a series of opportunities to take Napper off the streets. It even suggested that the lives of Samantha Bissett and her 4-year-old daughter Jasmine could have been saved if police had acted on tip-offs, including one by Napper's own mother. The aftermath was as tragic as the crime itself. Gillian Stamp, Napper's sister, expressed her desire to move on and protect her children from this grim legacy. She stated, "I don't want to think about him anymore. I have thrown away every photograph I had of him. He should die a slow death and be treated in the same way he treated those poor people." But amidst the anger and sorrow, speaking to the Mirror, Andre said there was also room for forgiveness. Alex, the son of the victim, stated, "If you don't forgive the person who caused you harm, then you become that person in time." Andre showed compassion for Napper, considering his troubled past of mistreatment, foster homes and care. He added, "He was a poor, mistreated child for some time, and some people respond one way and others respond in another way. That allows you to feel some kind of compassion." In the end, the story serves as a potent reminder of the vital role that justice systems play in society and the dire consequences that can arise from their shortcomings. It underscores the need for reform, not just in the Metropolitan Police Force, but in law enforcement agencies worldwide, to ensure that no one else falls victim to such heartbreaking circumstances. I would finally like to send my condolences to all the families and friends of those affected by these tragic events. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe. Also like, comment and subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay notified when new content is uploaded.